Beyond the Pillion is recorded on the traditional lands of the Kaurna people, and we would like to pay our respects to elders, past and present.
Welcome to Beyond the Pillion. This is episode 20. My name is Kahiwa Sebire. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the chaotic one.
And my name is Mark Drechsler, he, him pronouns, and that's right, I'm the one tattooed on his arm.
Well, we are still deep in the throes of getting ready for Sheilas Shakedown in now just a couple of weeks. In particular for me, getting ready for the ride over and back, so doing the full 1,800, 2,000 odd kilometres on the bike this time, which will be quite exciting.
No backup car.
No backup car. So in this episode, we are going to be talking about choosing and prepping the right gear for a long distance ride.
Which makes me think a little bit about, so I did a similar trip late last year. In fact, almost identical trip. So about 1,800 kilometre round trip over about 6 days, perhaps, 5 or 6 days. Some of those days, so it doesn't sound like a lot of kilometres, but some of those roads were very windy. So sort of 300 odd kilometres in a day was actually quite a lot of riding along the Great Ocean Road. And yeah, it was the first long ride I'd done, like multi-day, riding and then staying somewhere, getting up and just rinse, repeat for multiple days. And it was, I think it did make me learn a few things, even though I've been riding for many years. It was definitely something that I got off thinking, next time I'll probably do a few things differently.
And that's the plan for this episode. So building off of what was discussed in episode 13 in particular, where we covered preparing your bike and planning the route for longer rides. This time around, we want to think about what gear and things to actually pack because when you are riding on a motorcycle, longer types of rides, you don't necessarily have the extra storage space that might be available if you were driving in a car or van or some other type of vehicle. And this can be a particular challenge when you are, as kind of Mark was talking about, and we're planning, for longer day, multi-day rides, potentially going through country or rural areas where there might be limited availability or opening hours of different kinds of shops and services. It can be a bit of a challenge to work out actually what to take.
Absolutely. And about the only real distinction that we will also draw in terms of drawing a boundary on what we're talking about, what we're not talking about today is adventure bike riding through all sorts of terrain, all sorts of country, extended periods of time away from things like electricity, running water, internet, everything else. We're not talking about service stations, fuel, everything else. So we're not going to go into that kind of touring because part one, neither of us are experienced in it, and part two, it is a whole different genre of riding that really would warrant its own entire blog about long distance adventure riding, and I'm sure there are people who have done it better than we could.
Yes, and we do know a few of them. And so if that is something that you are interested in hearing more about, then please do drop us a comment or send us a message on Instagram or YouTube, and we will work that out for you. But for today, we want to have a bit of a think about when you are going for anywhere more than like a few hundred kilometres, or more than a few hours over multiple days, and you've got limited space and availability and storage and what you can take. What are the top things that you should consider packing? And we've got a list of about 7 Mark, do you want to start us off?
Absolutely. So, noting here that we're talking about potentially going through country areas, something that seemed worthy of a spot in the list at number 7 is some hard currency. And that is a bit of a mixture. So some folding money, but also some coins. Now, the reason this seemed to be useful to have in the list is I'm sure there are plenty of people out there, I'm one of them, who rarely touch physical money anymore. 90-something% of the transactions that I do will be by credit or debit card. It's just the way we're going as a society. Like it or not, love it or hate it, yada, 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 but that's kind of where we're at. So for me, it was a real reminder to say, yep, when you are in a situation where you need money as in actual money for an old school vending machine or or an older payphone, or at vendors' roadside stalls where they don't have electronic payment options, or anything like that, or even if you are in an area with sketchy internet, which living in Australia, I think we are sitting behind possibly Belarus or somewhere like that in terms of the quality of our internet. So not assuming that everywhere you go will have fantastic internet with brilliant payment options that you can just do as if you're in a major city. So carry some backup money. It is a low risk activity that is just, it's a piece of cheap insurance to carry some folding money and some coins with you no matter where you go.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can't be guaranteed to have access to places with internet, to ATMs to be able to get cash out, those types of things. The worst case scenario is you end up in a situation where if only you had some cash, something else might be able to happen, some water, some food, some maintenance, or some other kind of fix on your bike, some accommodation. You'd hate to not have it on you at that particular point. So that's number 7. Number 6 is something to actually keep your bike safe when you are stopping, particularly overnight. So on the journeys, the plans that we have done to Sheilas and rural Victoria, and to to Melbourne and back to Adelaide, you're stopping in some motels or hotels in country and rural areas. We've talked previously about the ease with which a motorcycle can be picked up and taken, even if it might not be yours. And it would be really, really upsetting, I think, to be in a situation where you are in a rural place with limited options for transport back to a major city, with all of your gear, and to wake up and your bike be gone. So number 6 on that list, we particularly recommend something like a disc lock over a chain or something else. They are a little bit heavier, but they actually take up really very little space in a top box or a pannier or some other type of thing, and are quite effective given the space that they take up in terms of being a deterrent and somewhat preventer of theft of your bike.
Absolutely. I think it's not just being in rural areas. It's no matter where you are, if you're away from home, you don't want to wake up one morning and find out that your sole mode of transport and most of your stuff has vanished, or even not vanished, even just been attempted theft and is then lying damaged to the point that you can't move it. That just opens up a whole new world of headaches that if you can avoid it with an alarm disc lock, just do it. It's worth yes, as you've said, Kahiwa, they are slightly heavy, but work around that, take it and use it religiously.
Yep.
Number 5, a basic first aid kit. So if you are out on the road, the most common things that you are likely to need are firstly going to be some painkillers. Sitting for extended periods of time, particularly if you are elderly like me, then every day is a new adventure into the niggles and pain that your body will bestow upon you. So having something just to stave off the pain for another 6 to 8 hours until you can get to your next destination and have a lie down is going to be really important. So whatever is appropriate, ideally non-drowsy. Don't be drowsy on a motorcycle. Bad life choice. Things like antihistamines if you happen to be allergic, or even if you aren't allergic but you've never really been stung by something. Avoiding a anaphylactic reaction is a really good plan. I've had them. They're not much fun. So carrying antihistamines is a very good idea. And even just if it's dusty and you're out there and you're riding through a whole lot of dusty, cruddy air that makes your nose start to do that.
Eyes and your nose, yeah.
Yeah, not riding along with a whole runny nose and eye thing going on is not a lot of fun. Band-Aids, if bits start to rub where they shouldn't. So shoes in particular, particularly if you're wearing shoes that you haven't worn before for extended periods of time. Being able to Band-Aid up is going to help you a lot, even hands as well. I have right now a callus that got sliced open yesterday from doing 4-point-something hours on a bike with gloves that I hadn't ridden long periods of time for. So stuff like that to be able to cover up. Bandages as well in the unfortunate event that you do need to, you have a graze or something like that. Bandages, hand sanitizer is not a bad idea either. Just for general, avoiding coming down with something horrible from, touching all sorts of things in roadhouses along the way. That sounded worse than I meant it to, but anyway. And finally, sunscreen. If you are anywhere, even if it's going to be cloudy, the highest risk spot, I reckon, on me anyway, will vary, and noting I have no hair, but the little bit between the back of my neck, between my helmet and the top of my jacket, just on the back of my neck there, I have to put stuff on that, otherwise I will get cooked. Kahiwa, you don't have to worry about that because you've got hair.
And I wear a neck gaiter, neck sock, pretty religiously for exactly this reason, because otherwise I will forget to put sunscreen on, and or the texture of it on the back of my neck is skin crawly. No, thank you.
And wherever it is, if there are exposed bits that you're out for 4, 5, 6 hours riding in a day, even if it's cloudy, they're going to get burnt. And the worst thing to do is to get them burnt on day one, and then know you've got another 3, 4, 5 days with exposed burnt bits. So avoid it. Carry your sunscreen.
And I was just thinking, together with antihistamines, you're talking there about, dust and things getting into your eyes or similar, even if you've got like a graze or something, something like eye drops or similar that are basically saline solution.
Yes, yep.
Can be really good for your eyes, but also to help potentially clear out a graze or a cut. Remembering that the goal of this is not necessarily to fix things, it's to get you into a fit enough state, generally speaking, to be able to get you to the next stop.
Spot on.
Where hopefully, a more robust set of medical equipment and services will be available to you.
As you take your next stop into Wolf Creek. But yeah, definitely. I didn't have that one on there, but I think eye drops, particularly you are going to be sitting on a bike, even if you have your visor down and or glasses on, you're still going to have a lot of air rushing past your eyes. Do that for enough hours, you are going to start getting dry eyes. So carry some of that. It's a tiny little bottle that you can get those things in. Yeah. It'll be worth it.
Definitely.
Number 4.
Yeah, number 4, similar, but this time thinking about if something happens to your bike, what are the basic things to essentially do a bit of a MacGyver fix to that bike in an emergency, enough to get you through to the nearest town. So some of those things include some gaffer tape, or I don't know what it's called in other places, but essentially some kind of electrical mechanical tape thing that'll bring things together. Some zip ties, so things that'll help keep things together, a multi-tool or a pocket knife, something that can potentially help you either tighten things or pry things apart if they need to be. Essentially, this is, in a situation where you might have a low speed drop of the bike or something like that, and you just need to either tape something up, or if something comes loose or falls off, how can you connect it back on so that it is in a fit enough state to get you to the next mechanic or service station or somewhere where you can get some help depending on the severity of the incident. This is not about carrying a full, mechanic's shed on your bike. This is about enough to get you through to the nearest town, essentially.
Spot on. Running repairs.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Mark, number 3.
Cool. Number 3, yes. Sorry. Which kind of flows on from that running repairs. So you hope that along the way you won't have anything happen. But if you do, I think it is worth having a look beforehand at motorbike shops that are along your route, within the vicinity of anywhere that you're going, and I would suggest getting a list of them and their addresses and their phone numbers. Now, the reason I say getting a list of them, ideally in hard copy format, is kind of coming back to that emergency management stuff to say, okay, you're stuck in the middle of nowhere, you don't have internet, but you do have phone, or you do have access to a pay phone, or somewhere that you can at least phone somewhere to say, yep, you are stuck in wherever, and being able to phone up a motorbike shop and say, yeah, okay, I'm going to be rolling through your town tomorrow. Is it okay if I drop in and get a temporary fix done? And working in a bike shop, we do have that semi-regularly. People who are going, coast to coast from Australia, which is a big trip, going from the west coast over in Perth over to Melbourne or Sydney. I've had a few of those where they are passing through. They say, yep, in a couple of days' time, I'm going to be coming through Adelaide. Either I need a new tyre, or a couple of them have sort of been, hey, would you be able to do an oil and filter for me while I'm there, because they're doing such big trips. But even just knowing where they are, even if it's something as simple as you check your chain, it's starting to look a little bit dry or a little bit loose, phoning ahead and saying, hey, if I'm here at such and such a time, could I pop in and could someone please just do a quick adjustment of my chain and spray some chain lube on it just to keep me going until I'm home. I would like to hope that most motorbike shops are operated by people who would understand that kind of vibe and would, certainly like we do, say, yeah, okay, as long as I know you're coming, yeah, I'll make sure that there's space that we can do it for you, given most of these things are only relatively quick jobs. And yes, okay, some of them may charge you a small fee to do something like, yep, check and adjust and lube your chain, but that's still better than having to lug around all of the gear that you need to properly clean a chain, like degreaser, a chain brush, some rags, and some chain lube. That is stuff that you really can't afford to carry unless you've got masses of storage space, which on a motorbike, let's be real, you won't. So have that list. Hopefully you won't need to use it, but kind of similar to having the change in the folding money, it's just a very cheap, simple piece of insurance that you can do along the way. And that's why I put that one at number 3. Number 2.
Number 2, something that is very important and dear to my heart in particular. I think we talk about it a fair bit, but it is things to keep your hydration and your snacks up. So whether that is a water bottle, ideally one hopefully that maybe is insulated so it can keep some water cool for you, and risk, I don't know about you, but I'm not a big fan of warm kind of water when we're out riding or when it's warm, or a Camelback or other kind of water sack. I don't know what the non-branded name for that is. To be able to have a bag of water with a tube that you can then kind of straw loop and suck on through there. So that can be really handy. Don't take up too much space, but can be really useful to help keep you hydrated if you are going through areas or a route that might not have very many stops along the way, or you're wanting to avoid having to buy a bottle of water each time you might need to stop. The other thing being alongside that, things like snacks. So I know that is something that's a lot more important to me than I think to other people who might be riding, but particularly as someone with ADHD, with autism, I'm often thinking about what are the things that I can do to help keep my brain and my concentration going. So the snacks that I typically think about are something that's got sugar or carbs. So for a brief kind of energy boost, particularly if you're in an accident or collision or something else, something to kind of bump you up, or you're 30 minutes away from your next stop and you're starting to flag, something that can help keep your brain going. And also some protein options. So we know that these help keep you fuller for longer, so you're less likely to have hunger pangs, but they're also really good for aiding brain concentration over longer periods. So if there's a longer time in between stops, having protein snacks available for you will help keep your brain going that little bit better. So that's something I know that I think about quite a lot and tend to plan my route and my gear that I pack around water, and particularly snacks. And Mark, number one.
And number one, of course, there has to be a twist. And the twist is that number one in the way of things that you should be taking with you on your trip is actually a bike that is as prepared for the road as it can possibly be. Yes, you didn't see that one coming, did you? And this comes back to what we talked about in previous episodes, but we've sort of talked about a few of the things that you should be carrying, but a lot of the things that you hopefully won't need to carry or that you won't need along the way are going to be not needed because you have a bike that is as ready as it possibly can be for this kind of trip. So that means getting your servicing done, making sure that your tires are okay, making sure that everything on the bike is working, and you're not going to get 500 kilometers in and then hear that your brake pads are metal on metal and thinking, oh yeah, bugger, I should have changed those before we came. So really just being as prepared as you can, spend the money in advance. It's going to be a hell of a lot cheaper and easier doing that than having a tire that you've run down that you can see carpet through. And trust me, I see carpets that have been run, tires that have been run until carpet pops through them. I saw one last week at work. And when one of those blows, if you blow in the middle of nowhere, it's going to be a far more expensive activity to dig yourself out of that hole than just to prepare before you go along. And on that preparation side, even just things like knowing your bike, so knowing how it operates and knowing, for example, what your petrol tank capacity is and what you can expect in terms of your litres per 100 kilometres or miles per gallon if you're from the remaining country on Earth that uses that system. What it is and what you can expect to get out of a tank before you get down to maybe 20%, and then by that stage, like, there's really no excuse unless you get lost or something similar, or you have a mechanical fault, that you should be getting anywhere near empty on a road trip, which is why talking about things like, for this case here, talking about carrying extra bladders of fuel, which you can do. But I would argue that at least in the kind of terrain that we're talking about, plan your stops carefully, and you should not need to do that. I can't think of many places along the main drags in Australia where you would ever get caught up in that. Maybe Nullarbor Plain, which I've never done. That might be pushing the friendship, I think.
Like the road out west of Adelaide towards Perth, or as you head north from Adelaide towards
the centre of the country
and Northern Territory, Alice Springs kind of way. I'm aware that there are routes along there with quite long gaps between petrol stations, but that is, coming
That's
back
the
to
exception.
Episode 13, the point there around actually planning your route around those types of things. And if that is going to be the case, then you might need to take some extra fuel along with you, but ideally shouldn't have to if you know your bike and you have planned the route accordingly.
Yep. So that is our number one. Be prepared.
I mean, there are other things that we've talked about generally across, some of the other episodes that are still applicable. So, one of those is around the right gear for the right weather. So in episode 11, we talked about gear for riding in the winter. So if it's going to be potentially wet weather or cool, then thinking about, gear that'll help protect you from the rain, and keeping your gloves, your fingers nice and warm with proper gloves that are going to do that. And if it is going to be warmer weather, episode 15, we talked about riding in the summer. And the different options there in terms of helping you keep cool but also still safe and protected. But Mark, when you were thinking about your trip over to Melbourne, what were some of the things that you thought about when you were picking the gear that you would take with you?
It was particularly tricky, that one, because I was expecting a range of temperatures dropping down to like daytime temperatures of 14, 15, 16 degrees maximum, occasional rain, and then getting towards the end of the trip, getting up into the sort of mid-20s-ish, which is starting to get a little bit, not hot, but certainly warm during the middle of the day. So flexibility in gear and layering, and using the gear that I had that I could sort of rip layers out of. But the other thing in there, and I've got a reasonable amount of gear just because I ride so often right throughout the year, it was trying to pick the absolute best gear that I've got to do the job. Boots, for example, yes, I wore my proper riding boots for the entire trip, covered right up the leg, covering the ankle, lots of stability, lots of protection. And even if it had been hot for the whole time, I still would have worn boots. They just would have been lighter weight, but full protection boots. So it was, and about the other thing that I didn't wear that looking back I possibly could have was my back protector. Just because I was doing extended periods of high speed. If I'd come off, a back protector was probably about the only thing that I left in the shed. Every other tool that I had at my disposal in terms of the best gear that I had in my kit, I used on that trip. And that's not to say everybody has to have to buy every different bit of kit that you can possibly buy, because it gets really expensive. But use the best of whatever it is you've got. Don't leave anything in the shed at home and then get out and think, oh, damn, I wish I'd worn my better gloves or helmet or visor or whatever else. So that was probably the learning for me from it. What about you now, prepping for, like, we are now only a week and a bit away? Anything on your side around your bike or anything else that you're thinking of?
I think in terms of gear, it's pretty similar. It's that balance of, the best quality gear that's going to give me the most protection possible, because similarly going to be riding at quite high speeds for a fair chunk of the time. And, I want to have as much in my favor as possible if something was to go wrong, but also balancing that with comfort, because it's a couple of days of riding and then a couple of days at Sheilas and then a couple of days riding back, and I don't want to be taking two completely different sets of gear because of limited storage. So for me, that looks like proper boots that come all the way up the ankle, kind of almost mid-calf. So all the levels of protection through there, but they are really, really comfortable shoes for just kind of walking in, that I really, really love. full proper riding trousers that are also really comfy. Similarly with the jacket, and I think I've got one that does have a back protector space in it. And again, it's one that has layers that I can take in and out if it's warmer or cooler, but offers all of the protection and armor through the back and the elbows and the shoulders and stuff like that, and full proper helmet. And the gloves is probably the one that I'm still deciding on which gloves to take with me, depending, I think, on how much it is likely to rain, which we never quite know, versus how hot is it going to be. But probably be leaning towards the middle of the ground gloves, I think. But essentially, same kind of idea. What's the best that I've got that's going to be that good balance of protection and comfort given the conditions that we're going to be in?
Sounds fair.
I think the other thing that we've been thinking about as part of this ride, again, that we've already talked about more generally, especially in episode 13, was just thinking about the storage setup. So taking into account that on a bike, you've got limited options for where you can and ways that you can store gear. We've done a little bit of work to get a few more options than what I had, I think, when we recorded episode 13, and I did a bit of a ride up to the Clare Valley. But so we will have a video on Instagram and on YouTube coming out not long after this, just kind of showing the gear, the proper storage setup that we've got going, at least on my bike, for the ride over to Sheila's, including top box, some panniers, and the flying solo rear seat bag combo, which means I'm not having to have a backpack. Got really good freedom of movement, but actually have quite a fair bit of storage options, I think, on that one.
It's for our listeners, do check out the posts about that, because it's turned out to be quite a good, no, actually not quite, a really good sort of touring rig setup, I think, and should give you some good flexibility around where you can store your gear. And once you get that set up and on the road, I think it's going to be, it's going to be really good. You're going to have a great time.
I think it's going to look pretty good. Nice and modular. Looks pretty easy to get things on and off. So that's always handy.
Definitely.
But our takeaways from today in terms of choosing and prepping the right gear for a long distance ride, Mark, what have we got?
Kind of. Well, I think we talked a little bit about it, but prevention. Prevention is a big part of a successful, safe, and enjoyable trip. So you can do all the preparation around things to bring with you, but also really important to just think about planning the route that you're going to be taking, planning those stops, knowing where the bike stores are along the way, where the fuel is, where the food is, and having things like that list of bike shops and spare money, things like that, just so you can be as prepared as you can be on how you're going to tackle that route.
Mm-hmm. And I think along the lines of that is also, as you mentioned, in terms of preparation, having a bike that's ready to go. So if you've done the regular checks, the regular maintenance, and a recent service and checked your tires and all those types of things, then that is going to put you in the best possible space to have a smooth and easy ride, no matter the distance. Together with the route and the bike shop details, as you mentioned as well, Mark.
And probably one final thing is that this all sounds great in theory, but odds are the first time you do this, you are going to end up with, at least 1.5 times as much stuff that you think you want to take with you than you have storage space. And you will come down to, similar to any kind of touring in any vehicle, it's just more acute on a motorbike, having to make decisions on what to bring, what not to bring, and always look at the highest value versus the smallest space and the least weight. That is the tension that you are going to be struggling with. So anybody that's done hiking, backpacking, camping, anything like that, where, similar kind of concept, it's very similar to that. You are trying to get the most bang for the buck for every little bit of a space that you can, because on a motorbike, you are really limited in what you're going to carry. So think it through in advance, do some mock-ups, do some planning, have a list of stuff, and then be brutal, be ruthless in what you leave behind.
I feel like this is a subtweet for me because I am a chronic overpacker. So this is going to be a fascinating challenge for me, and definitely in the lead up to Sheila's, I've already kind of tried to start thinking through what to actually pack, and then doing a bit of a dry run through all of the different bags. The other thing being, at least with the setup that I've got, the top box has a weight limit. The panniers have a weight limit, and so thinking through what can reasonably go in which bag is also another aspect of that. Value versus smaller space and the least weight, and how is that going to balance across the different storage options?
Absolutely. It'll be good. You're going to have a fantastic time. It will go well, and you'll keep on learning, and that's what this whole thing is all about.
Absolutely. I think it's going to be a whole lot of fun, and I'm excited to hopefully bring back to you all some exciting stories from Sheila's. But next episode, we have my conversation with Amanda Phoenix from Flying Solo Gear and Peak Moto, #not-sponsored. Just a big fan. But please, until next time, ride safe and have fun. Beyond the Pillion is brought to you by Kahiwa Sebire and Mark Drechsler, and Women Moto, the online magazine for women motorcyclists. Go to womenmoto.com. Follow us on Instagram and YouTube at Beyond the Pillion. Drop a comment or send us a DM to let us know what you want to hear more about. And if you like this episode, please leave a review or tell a friend.